Hello my fellow Nightcrawlers, welcome to a brand new video. As usual, grab your blankets and grab your snacks to get comfortable because today we're looking into the Keddie Cabin case. Keddie Cabin case, say that 3 times fast. This case is absolutely brutal. It's very disgusting and it's gonna get really dark pretty dang quickly, so do understand that and bear that in mind while we prepare to hop into it. Before we hop into the case though, I would like to thank today's sponsor, The Ridge Wallet. Mwah! I'm not gonna lie, I've wanted one of these bad boys for so long, so knowing that they wanted me to sponsor their product, it makes me so happy. Something I love about it is how freaking sleek it is. Look at that. It's super freaking thin. It's not giant and bulky. It can easily fit in your pocket. It's one of the best minimalistic wallets that I've ever seen. And I've looked pretty dang hard for some good minimalistic wallets. If you're interested in getting one of these, feel free to head to ridge.com/night. You can get 10% off for your purchase. On top of getting 10% off and getting a Ridge wallet, you also get basically put in a giveaway. With every dollar that you spend on their website before September 18th, you get entered into a giveaway to win a Jeep or $50,000 cash. Again, that is ridge.com/night. Enough talk though, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get into this case. The story starts off with a woman by the name of Sue Sharp. Sue was often regarded as a quiet and reserved woman who primarily kept to herself. She didn't have any criminal records or was known to any local authorities. In 1979, Sue made a brave decision to leave her abusive husband and move from North Carolina to Northern California to be closer to her brother, who lived in a small town in Quincy, California. She ultimately decided to settle down in a place called Keddie. This was basically around 5 miles away from where her brother lived. Sue found a small cabin in the Keddie resort to call home. The home was considered to be of low-income housing, but Sue was happy to call Cabin 28 home. She worked part-time at Quincy Elks Lodge and then did some typing classes on the side to learn a new skill. Despite the circumstances that brought them to California, the kids nested in their new life and frolicked in a forest, stream, and on railroad tracks behind the property. Johnny, who was the oldest, took an unfinished room downstairs. With no indoor stairs or separate bathroom, he used the back staircase or front door to gain access to Cabin 28. Other than this small inconvenience, he was content with his new semi-independence. The younger boys, Rick, who was 10 years old, and Greg, who was 5, shared a room. This was near the front of the cabin near the living room. Sue and her youngest daughter, Tina, aged 12, took a place near the kitchen, kind of tucked more in the back. The eldest daughter, Sheila, aged 14, actually had a kid back in Oregon, so that's interesting. The baby was put up for adoption though, and then Sheila was able to reconnect. Now with everyone back home, Sue slept in a twin bed while the girls shared a queen. On occasion, Sue actually had to sleep on the pull-out couch in the living room, falling asleep in front of the TV. Times were pretty tough for them as well. Living quarters were cramped, and Sue had to stretch $250 received from the Navy, which barely covered rent, food stamps, and a stipend she received from being enrolled in the CETA, a federal education program of the era. All of that just to barely make ends meet. On Saturday of April 10th of 1981, it was a normal day for the Sharp family. Sue was running errands and taking care of things around the house while the kids were outside playing with their friends. As evening was approaching, Sheila decided to take it upon herself and stay at the neighbor's house, the Seabolts. John actually went out with a friend as well and was planning on returning later that night. 12-year-old Tina decided to spend time at home though, taking care of her 2 siblings, the 10-year-old and the 5-year-old. While Rick and Greg, the younger siblings, were running about, they also had a friend over by the name of Justin. Justin was going to be having a sleepover that night. At 7 a.m. the following morning, Sheila returned home to get ready for church. When she walked through the door, she discovered a horrible scene. She saw her mother, John, and Dana lying dead on the floor. All 3 of them had been bound at the wrists and ankles with electrical cords and medical tape. She ran to the Seabolts' home to get help. The Seabolts' teenage son, Jamie, went back to Cabin 28 to see if anyone in the home was still alive. He found Rick and Greg as well as their friend Justin in a bedroom. The 3 boys seemed completely unaware on what had gone on in the house just a few feet away from them. Jamie removed the boys through a back window so they wouldn't be exposed to the scene in the living room. Less than an hour later, police arrived at the scene to investigate the murders. Police walked into one of the bloodiest crime scenes they had ever witnessed. There was blood on almost every surface on the living room. Both Sue and her son John had their throats slashed. They had also been stabbed multiple times and had blunt force trauma to the head. Dana also had severe head injuries and appeared to have been strangled. Sue was found with a bandana and her own underwear shoved deep into her throat with a piece of tape securing the gag into place. While Sue was nude from the waist down, police did not find any evidence she had been sexually assaulted. One aspect of this entire thing that police found odd was that Sue actually was covered with a yellow blanket. They could also tell that it was placed afterward, not before or anything like that. This was due to blood being exposed on the legs already. Sue was found with defensive wounds on her body, so investigators had reason to believe she actively fought off her attackers. However, the boys did not appear to have a chance to fight back. All the injuries they received appeared to have happened when they had been tied up. Police believed, given the number of people in the home, they were most likely dealing with more than one killer and found multiple weapons at the crime scene to support their belief. 2 bloody knives had been left behind, one of which came from Sue's own kitchen. A hammer was also found close to the bodies, and even a plastic piece of a BB gun was near them as well. Police actually managed to find a fingerprint on the handrail on the back door. Other than that, despite all of the blood, it seemed like none of it came from the intruders themselves. Police soon moved on to interviewing the survivors' family members and surrounding neighbors. It was then they realized someone was missing. No one knew where 12-year-old Tina was. Police actually had to get the FBI involved to have any sort of hopes to finding Tina. Nearby neighbors reported that there was muffled screaming happening around 1 a.m. or so. None of the neighbors could determine where it was coming from though, so they just opted to not doing anything. When police interviewed the 3 surviving people, it actually became pretty clear that they had slept through this horrific thing that had happened. That is some heavy sleeping. That is tragically awful heavy sleeping. My goodness. Police felt this was very unlikely though. There had to at least been someone that heard something. As it turns out, the police were actually right. Justin, one of the surviving boys, actually heard all of this going on. Justin began to see a therapist to deal with the trauma of the murders. He told the therapist he was having dreams about the murders. In his dream, he kept trying to stop Sue's bleeding and covered her up with a blanket to keep her warm. Justin's therapist started to wonder if it was possible he had repressed the memory of the murders and it was coming out in his dreams. The therapist pried Justin a little further to try and remember what would happen that night, and Justin had a story to tell. Justin stated he was still up watching television in the bedroom while the Sharp boys slept. He went on to say that he heard Sue in the living room talking with 2 men. He described the first man as tall with blonde hair and a mustache, while the second was shorter with dark hair and clean shaven. He said both men wore glasses. He then claimed that while Sue was talking to the men, John and Dana came home for the night and an argument ensued. He said the argument became violent and resulted in the murders. Justin saw Tina come out of her room, which had upset the men, and they took her with them. Justin was able to provide enough information for sketches to be completed of the possible suspects. Police then released these sketches to the public. Just over 3 years after the murders, on April 22nd of 1984, a man by the name of Ronald Pedrini actually found a human skull and a mandible. See, Ronald's a good man. He didn't just leave that there. He actually reported it to the police. Now, I bet you're thinking, okay, how do you just stumble across a human skull? Well, he claimed to be collecting bottles. Hey, whatever. If he was collecting bottles, that's fine. He just found a human skull and a mandible, so that's an interesting thing. At first, police didn't think much of it. They thought it was probably some remains from a Native American, which is interesting. The bones were found 100 miles from the Keddie Cabin, and no one thought about Tina Sharp, who had never been found. However, when the news came out regarding the discovery of the bones, a call came in to the sheriff's office. The caller wanted to know if police had considered the remains being that of Tina Sharp. The caller also seemed to know specific details about Tina. Despite this, the recording of the call was not initially investigated, nor was it logged into evidence. The recording was set aside for detectives to find a few months later. When police looked closer at the possibility, they had forensic analysis done on the teeth in comparison to Tina's. It was a match, and they were able to confirm Tina had been found. When the area where her remains were found, Was further investigated, a pair of jeans, a blue jacket, a blanket, and an empty medical tape dispenser were found. 40 years later, no arrests have been made. Ever. Not one. However, that doesn't mean that police don't have suspects in mind. Police are looking closely at Martin Smart and his friend John Bobbiday. Martin and his wife, Marilyn, were neighbors of the Sharp family. They were also enrolled in the same typing class with Sue. Martin had just met Bo a few weeks prior to the murder at the local Veterans Affairs hospital, and they had become very friendly with each other. Martin allowed Bo to move into his home. On the night of the murder, Martin, Bo, and Marilyn had gone out to a bar together for a few hours. When they returned home, Marilyn stayed home, but Martin and Bo went out again. The two men were again noticed at the bar much later in the night, but this time they were wearing suits. After the murders, Martin had claimed that he was missing a hammer and that he didn't know what happened to it. The hammer was actually found in a pond near Cabin 28 in around 2016. The thing is, though, is that police feel that hammer was intentionally placed there. Not long after that, Martin left town and moved to Reno, Nevada. He left a letter for Marilyn that said, "I've paid the price for your love, and now I've bought it with 4 people's lives." Both Martin and Bo had criminal records, with Bo even having ties to an organized crime in Chicago. While Martin was in Reno, he had apparently confessed to a VA counselor he had killed Sue because she had convinced Marilyn to leave him, and he had to kill the kids because they got in the way. The counselor contacted authorities to report what he was told, but it was not logged as evidence. How was this not logged as evidence? I don't understand. What? Current investigators had actually found some very concerning details about the case. Apparently Martin and the local sheriff, best buds, homies. Investigators have a very high probability of believing that this relationship got in the way of investigating the case. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, if your buddy is being convicted of a crime, you're like, yo, Tommy would never do that. Tommy would never. Sometimes they actually do it, you know? Smart died in 2006 and Bobbiday died in 1988. And although they can no longer be prosecuted, police still believe there are people out there involved in the murders. DNA testing has even revealed another living suspect who the police want to find. Police also believe there are people who were accessories to the murder after the fact, who also may face charges. They haven't given up their case. Goodness gracious, this case is a doozy, to put it simply. If you look into the crime scene photos of this case, it is disgustingly brutal. And it's awful, especially knowing that kids died in this. I've linked the find a graves to all the victims so that way you can leave some very kind messages to them. May they forever rest in peace. Before we hop in the end segment though, I would like to thank my Knighted Patreons and my Tormented Knight. Tormented Knight, we got Chew You Up Like Bubblegum for my Knighted Patreons. We got Shizen, Alvaro, Bunny, Cleta, Kira, Steffi Muse, Teddy Elliott, Tim O'Banian. Please feel free to correct me on that. I'm sorry. And Lucas. Thank you guys so much for your very generous support. It really does mean a lot to me. I appreciate it greatly. Thank you. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed the video, why not like and subscribe? It definitely helps me out. If you didn't, why not dislike and let me know what I can improve on for next time. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I will see y'all in the next one.